Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and as you can tell, this morning I'm cold. I should have worn another layer. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. We're studying the book of Titus today. We're moving on to the qualifications of elders that pick up in verse 5. In fact, we're going to go through verse 9 today if you would like to join us in the text. This is part of our study, the neglected books of the New Testament, and Titus is clearly one of those books. Titus is a co-worker of Paul, has been from the beginning. Paul is writing to him as he has taken him from the mission field and given him a local work. He's working on the island of Crete, and he's establishing those congregations that have been planted on the island of Crete. And the first order of business is to establish elders. And it's going to be his job to see that elders are established in each of these congregations, as it was Timothy's job, which Paul makes clear in 1 Timothy chapter 2, which is something that he and Barnabas did after their first missionary journey. This in no way expresses the authority of the minister over the elders, but quite the opposite. It establishes the fact that congregations are going to be led by a plurality of shepherds, and not by some one guy who is the only spokesman and the head honcho and the big cheese at the congregation. That no congregation has a head honcho, has a jefe, has a big cheese. It's not in God's plan. But he gets right to the point with Titus, which is so much shorter than either 1st or 2nd Timothy. After the introduction, he gets right to the point. The first thing you got to do, dude, is make sure that these congregations have elders. And as we read the rest of the letter, we'll find out why that's so urgent. Verse 5, and I'm going to read through verse 9. For this reason I left you in Crete, that you might set in order what remains, and appoint elders in every city as I directed you. Namely, that if any man be above reproach, the husband of one wife, having children who believe, not accused of dissipation or rebellion, for the overseer must be above reproach, as God's steward, not self-willed, not quick-tempered, not addicted to wine, not pugnacious, not fond of sordid gain, but hospitable, loving what is good, sensible, just, devout, self-controlled, holding fast the faithful word which is in accordance with the teaching, that he may be able both to exhort in sound doctrine and to refute those who contradict. Okay. Well, as we said yesterday, there are a lot of threes that we're used to reading about in the New Testament, and in the book of Titus, Paul repeatedly gives us two of the three. Like he gave us the Father and the Son in the introduction, but not the Spirit. He gave us faith and hope in the introduction, but not love. And here he uses two of the three words for elders, but not the third. So anyway, he doesn't use the word shepherd in this passage. He uses the word elder, which means old guy. Presbyteros means old guy. It doesn't mean anything else. It means old man. And the second word that he uses is overseer, someone who is the head of the work crew, someone who makes sure the job gets done. So anyway, those are the two words that he uses. The reason I left you in Crete is to establish these congregations, and the first order of business is to make sure there are elders in these cities. Now we're going to find out later on about the problems of this congregation, why it's so important to have leaders, overseers, old guys that can lead these congregations. And then he gives us the list. And the way this list has traditionally been used is to tack it onto the end of the list in Timothy, and to make a master list out of the two lists, and then to completely disregard the list in 1 Peter 5, which really does tell an elder how to do his job. That's not the way the word should be used. All three should be considered, and the two lists of qualifications should be used to explain each other, not to make an exhaustive and longer list. Because Paul didn't say to Titus, listen, I didn't write you everything. You need to get Timothy's list or you don't have the complete list. And he didn't write that to Timothy either. So this shorter list is sufficient by itself. And the reason we have two lists is so that we can get a deeper understanding. These two men had already been living with, working with Paul. They knew what he meant when he wrote these lists. We don't have that same access. So we get two lists to get a better sense of what Paul's talking about. But we don't use them, like one is incomplete. Each list by itself is complete. And if we don't understand something said in one, then we compare it, we lay on top of it the other list. And that helps us to understand. And we're not going to have time today to go through every qualification, but it's clear what he's talking about. And the word above reproach begins and ends this list, and it continues, and it is mentioned in the middle of this list. The guy's got to be above reproach. The husband of one wife. Does that mean he's only ever had one wife in his life, or that he's not a polygamist, or that he doesn't have a messy divorce out there somewhere? He has to have children who believe. Does that mean he can't have one child, or or does it mean he just has to have raised a child or children? The only alternative is to say to have a child and or children, which would be kind of awkward. Does it mean that they have to be faithful in the church, or just that they have to be Christians? I'll leave you to think about that. He can't be accused of anything bad. A lot of this is perception. In fact, I would say much of it is perception, because perception is necessary. It's important. The overseer must be above reproach. There's that word again. God's steward. There's a guy in charge of the job, okay? God's steward. Not self-willed, not quick-tempered. This is not a guy this guy's got to be patient, who's got to be loving, who's got to take a velvet glove on the hand that he uses, even if he has to take a firm stand with that hand. It cannot be somebody that likes to stir the pot. It cannot be somebody who is impatient, who is short-tempered with people. It cannot ever be that guy. Hospitable. That means putting your life on the line in the first century. You know that. Loving what is good, sensible, just, devout, self-controlled. That makes sense. And prepared to encourage and to strengthen those who need strengthening, and to put his foot down when people are teaching that which is false. Well, thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. We'll see you tomorrow.